to be honest, I wish I had a radar. I mean, it's for a guy who spends a lot of time looking at China, it feels more like you're deep in the trenches than up in the sky, overlooking a situation. It feels like you're getting fired at from every direction. Um, Having said that, look, I do spend a lot of time in China and looking at China. There's obviously been a ton of news over the past few months. China's been, I think, was probably the one big disappointment last year, following a dud reopening. It's the one stock market in the world that's been going the wrong way. I mean, you know, even perennial disappointers like Europe actually had a decent year last year. Japan's in a roaring bull market. India's in a roaring bull market. Mexico, Brazil. So really, China's the outlier. So it's you're only ever as happy as your most miserable child. So I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out what is going on there. Obviously, what's going on is we have a real estate bust, but it's a real estate bust that so far hasn't prevented the banks from lending. It hasn't imploded the banking system. Instead, bank loans are actually picking up a lot, and it leaves you to a very different cycle from what China's been historically, where historically, real estate was always at the center of everything. What we're seeing right now is the government has basically come out and told the banks lend aggressively, lend to everybody who needs money, except real estate guys. And so and the reason I think people should pay attention to this is, today anybody who's an industrial company in China has as much capital as they want. And de facto, we're going to end up with a lot of supply in a lot of places. We're already seeing it in the auto industry. From nowhere, China's become the biggest auto exporter in the world in just 3 years. And and now you've got every automaker in the world clamoring for protectionist measures against China. I don't think that's an anomaly. I think we're going to see a whole lot more of that in industry after industry over the coming years. Well, I think the amount of capacity that's being put by China in certain sectors. Again, autos is the obvious one, and I think we have started, because of China's excess capacity, we've started a massive bust in electric vehicles. I mean, we're seeing it right now, right? The Tesla share price is going down double digits every week, or at least it feels like. And so now all of a sudden, instead of being a Max 7 in the US, we're now a Max 6. From there, I think that the question will have to be, hold on, if we've put up all this excess capacity in electric vehicles, what's the impact for the semiconductor industry? What does that mean for the broader tech world, frankly? Is the blow up that we're now seeing in the EV space reminiscent of the dot-com blow up in 2000s? You may remember that in 2000s, when the dot-coms started blowing up, everybody just piled in to the telecom infrastructure guys. It was like, yeah, okay, fine. These pets.com, that's a stupid business model. But I'm going to buy Lucent. I'm going to buy JDSU. I'm going to buy Cisco, and everything will be fine. And for 6 months it was. And then, Global Crossing went bust, and MCI WorldCom went bust, and all of a sudden these guys weren't fine at all. Right now, I think we're heading into the phase now where all the EV guys are hitting the skids, just excess capacity, not enough demand. From there, is that just a one-off and we don't have to care? Or does this start having repercussions? And obviously the link to the broader tech chain would be through the semiconductor industry. So I think it probably makes a lot of sense to pay a lot of attention to that. Well, look, the U.S. election is always the most entertaining, right? It's now I think what's fascinating this year when you look at the U.S. election is, for me, is the question of whether the sort of two-party dichotomy manages to maintain their duopoly, their de facto duopoly. You have the rise of, I would say, attractive third-party candidates, whether Bobby Kennedy, whether Joe Manchin, at a time when the two main candidates are really not very popular at all, for perhaps different reasons. But so if ever the two-party duopoly in the U.S. was going to get shaken up, it's got to have to be this year. Like if they manage to maintain their duopoly with the two candidates they have, um, and again, third party guys coming in with decent platforms, decent uh, broad following, decent social media um, uh, presence, and decent fundraising behind them. If they don't manage to break out with that, then I guess it'll never happen. Um, Now another election that I think matters. Now, interestingly, everybody's like spending a lot of time on the Trump Biden, but I'm not even sure it matters all that much. On the other side of whether it's Trump or Biden, you have very easy fiscal policy and you have very easy monetary policy, almost regardless who gets elected. Um, the one election that could end up having a massive impact on markets is the Indian election. Um, and here, India is today one of the world's most expensive stock markets. I think it's gone up 10 out of the past 12 years from memory. Um, it's on pretty much any measures. It's at the upper range of its historical trading range. It's basically priced for continued growth, continued outcome. And don't get me wrong, the Indian story is a great story. It's very exciting. We in our research have been pushing it for a number of years. It's a great story. It's a great story. But um, I think in investors. In the investors' collective imagination, a lot of that story depends on Modi's ability to continue delivering infrastructure, to continue delivering, roads, railroads, telecom lines, all the stuff that India has gone a lot better at doing in the past few years. So now the interesting thing about India is they've got, just like Britain or Canada, they got a first past the post system. um, and very often it's such a big country. It's not really a country; it's a continent, really. Different religions, different local issues, different languages, so many different things, and that you'd never quite know on from you know from from MP to MP what the issues are going to be. So logically, Modi should win. But in Indian elections, you often have surprises. And if ever you have a negative surprise against Modi, um, then the Indian stock market will probably correct quite a lot. So it's the one election where potentially, if you have an adverse outcome, the market will take it very badly. The other big one is the European Parliamentary election. And here, I think it's almost baked in the case that the right wing populist parties are going to absolutely crush it. Um, and, oh yeah, I mean, like the AFD in Germany, the Rassemblement National in France, Geert Wilders in Holland, all these guys are going to absolutely crush it. And it matters because if these guys make up the biggest party in the European Parliament, they can start directing, who gets to be a European commissioner. They can start directing some of the policies. So the market may freak out a little bit at that. The right wing populist cleaning house at the upcoming European election would undeniably not be great news for the euro. So the euro could trade heavy on the back of that. Okay, so like I'm sure you do, but and most people in our business, you end up spending at least a third of your time reading. I subscribe, I think, to 25 different Substacks. Obviously, get a lot of sell side research, and there's so much great stuff out there. And I'd have to say, this is what's so exciting about the time we live in. You want to find a great guy on the chemical industry, there's now a Substack on that. You want to find a great guy, on the auto industry, there's like 20 Substacks on that. So getting access to information really is it's just so much easier. Having said that, the whole challenge, of course, is how to frame all that information correctly. Now, I'm instead of saying something recent, for me, I'd like to talk about one of the guys, and I often quote him in my work. But there's a British intellectual called Cecil Northcote Parkinson who wrote a lot in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he wrote two books that have really massively framed the way I look at the world and the way I think. One of them, one of them is like, it's an hour's read. It's really a long article. It's called Parkinson's Law. And it reviews how organizations evolve. And it's a very fun read. It's a satirical read, so it's super fun to read. But I give it to everyone I know. I've given it to everyone in my firm to read. I give it. And you can find it on Amazon. There's been reprints, etc. You can probably find it for free on the internet. So Parkinson's Law, everyone should read that. But his bigger work, which is not satirical, is really a work of history, and it's called East West. And it's basically how the pendulum of economic power and the pendulum of political power, historically has swung from east to west and back again. How sort of political void in one area, gets the other side to fill out. And he wrote this I think from memory, he wrote this in the late 50s. But it's been such an apt description of how the world has evolved in the past 10 years that for me it's been a massive roadmap in terms of understanding international relationship and understanding international trade. Even though the book is whatever it is, 50, 60, 70 years old, it reads like it could have been written yesterday. Snow. I'm right here in Vancouver, and I'm hoping for some snow, and we're not getting any because it's an El Nino year. So apart from snow, in terms of what I'm looking forward to, look, I think the coming months are going to be fascinating. The Fed has kind of painted itself into a corner, talking quite dovishly at a time when, frankly, the economy still seems to be humming along, and inflation hasn't fully gone back into the box. So the market is still, sort of 50-50 on a March cut, but it's definitely on a cut before the summer. What I'm looking forward to is, well, are we going to see this cut? And if we do, how does the US dollar respond? And especially, how does the dollar respond relative to emerging markets currency? Because for me, this was one of the super interesting developments of the past 18 months that nobody's talked about. The fact that we've had, one of the more aggressive Fed tightenings that you and I have seen, right? 525 basis points in the space of 18 months or whatever. It was very aggressive. And within that, not a single major EM went bust. In my career, each time the Fed tightened, you could count on Brazil hitting the skids, or Indonesia, or India, or Turkey. You could definitely count on Argentina. That was a given. But a bunch of others would usually hit the skids. And here we are. We've just had a big period of tightening from the Fed, and emerging markets have just looked through it. You look at Brazil bonds, Indian bonds, Chinese bonds, Indonesian bonds, Chilean bonds, Mexican bonds. They've outperformed U.S. Treasuries, not by a few percent, but they've outperformed by 25, 30, 40, 50% over the past few years. And again, this is simply unprecedented. Now, if they could outperform that much during a Fed tightening cycle, during a Fed easing cycle, I think the outlook for things like Mexico, Brazil, Indonesian bonds is absolutely phenomenal. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I think we have started a structural bull market in EM debt, and this EM debt structural bull markets will go on steroids once the US dollar rolls over. Japan's the place to go skiing today. Not only do they have great snow this year, they usually get great snow anyway, but with the yen at 150 or wherever we are, 148. Japan is just so dirt cheap. It's given away in the street. It used to be, when I was growing up, and living in Hong Kong, etc. If you wanted to go to Tokyo for the weekend, you'd get a second mortgage just to pay for dinner. Restaurants were outrageous. It was super expensive. It was awesome because the quality of everything you get in Japan is terrific. It's the best food in the world. Cities are so safe. Everything's it's basically the opposite of San Francisco and New York at this stage. But it was always super expensive. Now, not only is it safe, not only is it clean, not only is the quality amazing, but it's also super cheap. So, I don't know if that'll stay forever, but you're right. If you've ever dreamed of skiing Japan, now's the time to go, because if ever the BOJ starts tightening, the yen's going to go up big time, and you'll have missed your opportunity of a very cheap ski holiday. I mean, if you want to follow me, the best thing really is to go to our website, gavekal.com. I've also started uh, we own a stake in a private wealth business called Evergreen Gavekal in based in Seattle, and the CIO there writes a weekly newsletter, David Hay. He writes a weekly newsletter called The Haymaker, and I've started participating in that on his Substack. So you can look for that, The Haymaker, on Substack. I'll write a piece in there every week or every other week.